Do you know how every day you wake up to a new fresh hell? This isn't an Onion, Reductress, or Hard Times article. This is actually real. So a lawyer, someone who completed law school successfully and passed the bar, I remind you, wrote an official resolution for the National Federation of Republican Assemblies that took the position that Vice President and presidential hopeful Kamala Harris should not be allowed to be president because of a handful of legal rulings in the past, which they claim renders her ineligible. Now, obviously, this is grand high bullshit, so let me tell you why. Hi, I'm Angela Sutton. I'm a professor. I wrote a book on slavery, and I do videos explaining pretty much why every awful thing in this world comes from slavery, including this piece of hot garbage. So among the rulings that this repugnant fellow cited was the case of Dred Scott v. Sanford from 1857. Dred Scott was an enslaved man from Missouri, a state in which enslavement of black people was legal. He had moved around and been sold many times, so had experience living in Virginia, Alabama, etc., until he was purchased by a military captain who was stationed at many different military bases. From there, his enslaver brought him from Missouri, a slave state, to Illinois and the Wisconsin Territory, both of which were free. Scott sued for his freedom because according to federal law, he was in free territory and could no longer be considered a slave. But wait, there's more. While he was in free territory, he married his wife Harriet. And they had 2 daughters, Lizzie and Eliza, in free territory. So Scott actually won his first case, which was in the Missouri Circuit Court, which agreed with him. Once free, always free was the precedent that judge called on. But his enslaver appealed, and the Missouri Supreme Court sided with the enslaver. So Scott took it to the Supreme Court. I want you to think for a second, like how badass this was, right? You have a man of African descent, born to an enslaved person, considered an object to be bought and sold, abused and worked to death all of his life, right? He was not allowed to learn literacy, stand up for himself, or even speak up if his enslavers decided to sell his wife and children away. But Scott was a Christian man, and his family attended a church with an abolitionist pastor. They hooked him up with civil rights lawyers. Now, these guys are the same type of people who today represent families of people murdered by the police for being black or trans or undocumented, in attempts to set legal precedent to ensure that his family could remain free. This court case, as all of you AP history nerds know, was a ruling by our Supreme Court. So the judges that rendered the verdict, just wanted to show you a picture, no reason, they stated that our Constitution did not extend citizenship rights to black people. And since black people were not citizens, they didn't have constitutionally protected rights such as freedom from enslavement. It was essentially a decision about whether black people are human beings with the right to litigate, or if they are objects. Our country chose objects. Now this flies against every human rights standard, and at the time, Americans were pissed. Do you remember the year? 1857, right? That is right on the eve of the Civil War. You know, the war that we fought about slavery. Abolitionists went nuts, and centrist white Americans, who up until that point hadn't really picked a side, became politically aware for the first time because they couldn't escape conversations about Dred Scott and what that meant for the future of the country. This case ended up producing the very same arguments that Abraham Lincoln himself used when he made the Emancipation Proclamation. All that to say that it's no longer legal precedent, and it hasn't been since the Civil War. And that attorney who tried to use this case to make some kind of argument that Kamala, who is black, because if you have a black parent, you are black, can't be president because she isn't legally a person, but a thing? An object with no rights to run for office? That is what they are saying. That is the quiet part out loud.